I was lucky enough to ask one of the top business coaches for creators in the world, who has generated millions of dollars in sales and built one of the most respected online education platforms, how creators could actually grow their personal brands and market their projects to become successful. And he came back to me with some of the most real and thought-inspiring answers, and I honestly believe the next 20 minutes will change the way you think about promoting yourself, give you ideas to capitalize on, and it might even give you the permission you need not to market yourself. So Chris, what's the worst mistake people make when it comes to trying to grow a profitable personal brand?
The worst mistake is trying to reach too many people and not being clear about who you serve. I think this is kind of important. And the other mistake, which is a mirror to that, is not know who you are and what you stand for and being afraid to take a stance. This is critical. If you want to build a personal brand, there's 4 things that you need to do, according to Russell Brunson. To be an attractive character, you need to have an interesting backstory that ties into what it is that you're doing. You have to have a collection of short stories or parables that you can share and tell people. The third thing is you have to be willing to be polarizing. And the last thing is you can't be perfect. You have to have some character flaws.
Okay, hang on. So you have to have some flaws. What do you mean by that?
If you read Pixar's 22 Rules of Storytelling, and they're the world's most successful movie studio of all time, probably worthwhile to listen to them. Number 1 rule of storytelling is that the audience admires characters more for trying than for succeeding. And there's a reason why. It's because most of us don't have all the advantages lined up for us. We're not the best looking. We weren't raised in the best town by the best parents and had every advantage. So when we see characters like that, we don't relate to them. We do relate to the underdog character. And it's one of the reasons why Disney's main characters are oftentimes orphans or are raised by single parents, because they're often misunderstood and they're lacking some component of a dual parent household or whatever, or upbringing. And so when we see a character that's struggling, that's trying, who has character flaws, like they're impatient, they're short-sighted, they have a bad temper, some part of us relates to that, or they're an outsider, an outcast. Something is wrong with them and they're trying to overcome those things. And we admire them for working through their trials and tribulations and their setbacks.
So we shouldn't be afraid to promote our flaws. I'm guessing there's a certain way to do it. You don't just sort of run around going, I'm bad at stuff, right? But don't be afraid to show that.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word promote. What is more characteristic of people who are somewhat successful is that they tend to brush over or forget about it. I don't think it's even a deliberate act. Most of us want to appear as being put together, well composed and very thoughtful, and we're kind of embarrassed by some of these things that have happened to us in the past, poor decisions that we made, things that we've done wrong. In a society like, especially in America, it seems like it's almost unforgivable to say, I'm wrong, I've changed my mind, and I'm sorry. Those are just basic ways of how you grow as a human being. You're supposed to change your mind. But and especially in politics, you're not even allowed to say, I've changed my mind, which is such a strange concept to me. And so when we see public figures denying that they've ever done anything wrong, it seems to be the template in which we all fall or follow. And I think that's the wrong template. You'll notice some of the most charismatic, most beloved people, they openly talk about not only their success, but also their losses, their failures. And this is really important. And so when you're able to openly and honestly share about the times in which you failed, the time in which you were fired by a client because you were short-sighted on something, I think it makes you more endearing. It makes you more real and tangible. Take, for example, Anne Hathaway, who's a really beautiful person. She's tall. She's got like amazing facial features, and she's in movies, and it seems like she lives a charmed life. Nothing ever bothers her. But she's also a person who's regularly trolled because, oh, it's so fake. You're so perfect, huh? No one likes you. Martha Stewart is another person who's like, oh, it's all great. And so when you're so perfect all the time, when you fall, they're waiting at your doorsteps to chant and burn you at the stake. So when Martha Stewart was indicted and then ultimately served prison time for trade security issues, right? Everybody cheered because they're like, finally, I knew she wasn't perfect. So why create that sentiment amongst people who might otherwise be your fans? Let them in. Don't hold that back.
So what skills do you think are crucial to build an online business and a following?
Okay, first you have to say that not everyone is built or hardwired to do content marketing and to build a community or following online. And it looks wonderful from the outside until you actually start doing it. That's not to discourage you from doing it, but it's just to say this is not normal. It's only in the last 10 years that regular folks like myself who are naturally camera shy, who are introverted, who expend a lot of energy talking to people, have platforms where we can do this from the comfort of our own home. And so you have to kind of overcome a lot of fears and even technical setbacks. But if you desire to be a content creator, to build an audience or community around what it is that you're doing, you have to be very clear about how you serve them. You need to show up consistently, and you need to do this without expectations or any attachment to ideas. And I would be very cautious about wishing for a viral hit early on in your content creation career. Here's what's going to happen. A lot of people create content and no one sees it, no one cares, and they get kind of depressed, and then they find it not motivating to create more content. That's natural. I get that. But let's try to understand something. You're still trying to find your voice. You're trying to find what people show up to you for. So it's important for you to do this kind of in relative anonymity, in the dark, if you will. If you go back and you look at Mr. Beast, aka Jimmy, or Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, you're going to see their early videos, and they're kind of terrible. And it takes a while for them to find their voice, to figure out how to tell a story and how to show up on camera. And it's a good thing that that happens. Now, some people, I know a couple of people who, with only a few tries, have massive hits. They get millions of views on their videos. This is great news, you think. Wow, I'm really rewarded for this. What happens now? What happens on the second video that you produce that doesn't get those kind of results? You've now created an audience, an expectation about who you are and how you show up when you're still in the exploring, figuring it out phase. Now you're going to feel trapped by the first hit that you have or the second hit, and you feel boxed in. And so it's your own prison through your success. And it's not a great place to create, because what if you want to do something totally different? If you do that, what happens is you'll start to see people unsubscribe from your channel or give you a lot of criticism that I did not show up for this other kind of content. So you're kind of boxed in. So I much prefer to be able to work in anonymity in obscure audiences and places where I can still develop and hone my craft and figure out what it is I want to say before I blow up.
If you are one of these people and who doesn't want to make content and they've got a product to promote, what should they be doing if they don't want to be making stuff and they don't want to be in the front of it at all? Like, what would you find effective?
There's actually a lot of ways for you to make content without you actually appearing on camera or even hearing your voice speak. You can do tutorials that are very visually driven. You can hire a voiceover actor to read the script for you. You can use some of these synthetic text-to-speech programs, which I've seen people do, because if you speak with a heavy accent that makes it very hard for you to understand from an English-speaking audience, you can just type it out, and then you can have the program speak it for you. I've noticed some tutorials where I'm like, something feels a little bit off, but I'm not quite sure. And then I realized they're using some very sophisticated text-to-speech program to convert that. And there's lots of ways. One of my friends who's a very well-known artist / illustrator, he's never on camera. He never says anything. All he does is record himself while he's working the screen, and then he will do a time-lapse sped up version of that. And that's what he does for content creation and audience building. So there's a lot of different ways to bring people into what it is that you do. Another friend does Procreate drawings, has a camera above his hand and just paints and draws and just pinch and zoom. That's all he does. You never hear him. You never see him. So it doesn't mean that you're locked out of the content game. It just means you have to be a little bit more creative and work around your strengths and weaknesses. If you're a good looking person and you have natural like charisma and you were like a theater kid, we'll be on camera. If you have an amazing voice, do a podcast. If you're an amazing artist and you can draw and illustrate, just use whatever talents you have and make the most out of it, versus sitting there and saying, well, I can't do that other thing. What can you do? Focus on that.
If someone said to you, what social media platform should they use to promote themselves, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, don't use a platform to promote yourself. If your intention is going to promote yourself, you're probably not going to find an audience. The better question to ask yourself is, what platform do people who are like me, who think like me, what platform are they using and how can I deliver value to them? And then the second question is, where do I feel most comfortable creating content? Because oftentimes people are on multiple platforms. Look at where you're strongest in terms of how you like to express yourself, how you like to articulate yourself. If you're a really funny person, you have these kind of witty short statements, Twitter is an awesome place for you because Twitter seems to love comedians. You can clap back at people, you have funny observations of life, and you write those things and they work really well. Like I said before, if you're a visual person but you don't want to appear on camera, Instagram's a pretty good place. If you want to create long form evergreen content and you're okay with being on camera, YouTube's an awesome place. But don't think about this as self-promotion. One of the lessons we learned early on in year one of content creation is we created content as a means to drive traffic to our products. Not a lot of people watched our content, and there's not a lot of mystery to me as to why they didn't. The day that we committed to creating content, to show up, to prepare, and to give value without selling anything is the day our whole channel changed. We released that piece of content. A lot more people started watching it, and our reputation and our audience started to grow almost immediately. So don't show up to promote, show up to give value to others.
So Chris, thank you very much. It's been amazing having you on. Your answers have given me lots of things to think about too.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I know you've learned from one of the best business coaches on the planet. Watch this video next as an incredibly experienced businessman, Thomas Frank, shows you how he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month passively.